What is up, everybody? We are back again here for another episode of Black and Gold Weekly. It is episode 3 in partnership with Black and Gold Productions, and I have a very special guest here today. A teammate of mine here at Black and Gold Productions, Mr. Matt Barry, the host of kind of the flagship podcast here, the Black and Gold Productions LLC, the Black and Gold Hockey Podcast. Thank you so much for coming on. And this is really cool for me because I'm new here, obviously, only been doing this a few weeks. And outside of Mark, I haven't really gotten a chance to meet a lot of the other teammates that I have here at Black and Gold Productions. So it's great to have you on the show. Thank you for taking the time to do this.
Oh, sure, John. It's great to be here. And yeah, Black and Gold, the group is a great group of writers, and we have a really good group of podcasts on the podcast network as well. And this is a great addition having this YouTube weekly show with you. And watched a couple, the first couple, and you guys do a great job. And I'm just happy to be here, and I'm happy to have Bruins hockey back. So it's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. And that's definitely going to be a main focus of this show is Boston started their season last night with a shootout win 3-2 over the New Jersey Devils. Before we get into it, though, I just want to mention there's 3 links down in the description, everyone. If you're looking for Bruins gear, you're looking for NHL gear, any team, you're looking for NCAA college gear, whatever you want to represent, hoodies, jerseys, hats, anything that you need, check out those links down in the description. They're all there, easy to click on, and they'll have all of your needs as far as sports gear and hockey gear go. So the big story now, obviously, Bruins' first game. The season is underway, and man, is it great to have hockey back. Great to see the team on the ice again. Just quickly, your overall impression of that first game for Boston against the Devils.
Well, I thought they came out really well in the first period. Obviously, dominated the play for the most part. And my real concern, obviously, like a lot of Bruins fans, was the defense and how they would react without Krug and Chara there. A couple of staples of the defense for a long time. Krug on the power play, and of course Chara on the PK. So there were 2 really big voids there that they had to fill with some younger talent. And, having Jeremy Lauzon, that first pair, obviously, I was intrigued by how he would react to, that type of role. I think he had some good and bad parts to that game. I thought that in the beginning he did pretty well, but then of course he got beat on the 1 goal. And then I saw that his minutes, Charlie McAvoy actually played with several different defensemen throughout the game, and so he had some time on the bench, and I think it'll be a work in progress with Lauzon. And I really liked Zboril. I thought Zboril played really well. I think he turns the net really well behind the net. He shows some real good bursts of speed carrying the puck. But I thought the forward play, it's going to be the strength of the team. I think they have 4 really good, solid lines with some depth there. And you figure they didn't have David Pastrnak or Craig Smith in the lineup, and still rolled out. I really liked, and I liked it coming into the season. I really liked the thought of Trent Frederick with Wagner and Corrali, and they really showed their worth there. They can be heavy, they can be feisty. They have an opportunity to create some offensive chances too on the fourth line. I thought that they stood out. Of course, Bergeron. The power play did pretty well too. At times, they moved the puck well. They used the bumper with Bergeron. I thought Grzelcyk looked good there, which I thought he would. So overall, I thought it was a really good effort by them. I think toward the end of the second and in the third wasn't a great period for them, but they were able to pull it out with a shootout victory and the goal by Marchand. So it was, all in all, I think it was good to be back there, and I thought that they showed that they were the better team.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to add to that. I was just impressed with both teams with that being their first game. I thought there was a high energy, high paced game, a lot of up and down action, and it was a really fun game to watch. And with no preseason and a very limited training camp this year, I thought, maybe teams would come out a little bit sluggish just because they weren't in that game mode yet. But last night, neither of those teams came out sluggish. They were up and down the ice, very fast-paced game. for sure from the get go, and it was a really fun one to watch. You touched a lot on the young D, and that was going to be one of the main topics I wanted to talk about. Chara gone, Krug gone, Zaboral into the lineup, played with Kevin Miller. Kevin Miller, not really a young D man, but he's back after basically missing most of the last 2 years and didn't play at all last season. Lausanne comes in and plays a much bigger role this year. Um, Overall, I mean, I thought the defense was pretty good. They only gave up 2 goals against. Tuukka Rask made some unbelievable saves. He deserves a lot of credit, especially those couple of breakaway chances in overtime that he stopped. One from on Hughes, one on Palmieri, and throughout the game he made some big time saves. But the second goal was very fluky, bounced in off of like 3 different guys, and eventually bounced into the net. That's just one of those goals. There's not much you can do about it. So overall, I thought defensively they played well, and Lausanne had his moments where you were like, okay, maybe he's not really supposed to be up there, but he's never played that role before at the NHL level, and I think it's going to be a little bit of a work in progress to get him up to speed there. He did get I think he got skated around a couple times where I thought his foot speed was a little bit of an issue. But overall, I thought the young D was not bad, and it was a pretty solid first game for them. And overall, just defensively, it was a solid game for the Bruins.
I thought so too. With Lausanne, foot speed and that type of thing was one of the reasons why I didn't think he should play with Brandon Carlo to
Mm-hmm.
begin with. So up there on the first pair with McAvoy was one of my concerns really. And from what I saw from Zboril, you may see Zboril see a little bit more time with McAvoy there if he continues to play that way because he moves his feet well and he showed an ability to carry the puck some and but I thought overall, I thought Kevin Miller looked great, and
Mm-hmm.
I was one of the first ones to sort of be vocal about why would you put any type of money into him first day of free agency, and it
Yep.
seemed like they were really anxious to do that. But now looks like a pretty good move, and like you said, a veteran guy, the most veteran guy on the D, which is a very young D,
Mm-hmm.
even McAvoy and Carlo. Carlo's only in his fifth season,
Yep.
so it's Miller was a very good solidifier back there. Showed the physicality that they were lacking some last year on the back end. So I don't know. It'll be a work in progress with how the pairings go, and you get you also have Connor Clifton, scratched and in the sort of back there as well. John Moore is available, so you're going to see a revolving door, especially with the condensed schedule
Mm-hmm.
and the quick turnarounds. You're going to see a little bit of a revolving door there, but I think it was a good. I think it should ease the mind some of Bruins fans. I still think they need a legitimate top pair guy to go with McAvoy if they want to make a deep run.
Mm-hmm.
But that's down the road. But I think for right now, I thought it was a really good first game for them. It could have been the other way. It could have been 5 or 6 goals and running around their own end.
Yeah.
And that was my fear going in. And it wasn't really like that. And I thought for the most part, the D was efficient with the puck and it moved it well and it showed a little bit enough physicality to win pucks and so I thought it was a good first overall good first game for that young group.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And another thing, special teams. Bruins had some of the best special teams in the entire NHL last season. Great penalty kill, great power play, but they lost two real important special teams players for them with Torrey Krug, who had been quarterbacking the power play for the last number of years, and Zdeno Chara, who has been a staple of your penalty kill for almost as long as I can since he's been here, is almost as long as I can remember. And those two guys are not there anymore. So I thought special teams would be a little bit of a question mark heading into this season. How would they replace Krug on the power play, and how would the penalty kill look without Chara clearing out the front of the net and taking up that much space that he always did? But last night, 2 for 5 on the power play, a nice 40% to start the season, and 5 for 5 on the penalty kill. Obviously, it's only one game, but the special teams look like they might be okay even without those guys this year. And I thought Grizzlick, particularly on the taking over that quarterback spot on the power play, looked really good moving the puck.
Oh, I did too, and I thought coming into the season that Grizzlick was going to be an X factor with the power play because I think he's a good skater. He's a really good skater,
Hmm.
specifically on his edges, and he's got some good little offensive ability that he's
Mhm.
shown in flashes here and there in previous seasons. But I thought that he could come to the table and really, I didn't think they'd lose a ton
Mhm.
from Krug, and people would call me crazy, but I just didn't think they would. I think a lot of their power play success, is reliant upon, Bergeron when he's in there at the bumper, and
Bumper.
Pasternak on the left side, for the one timer, and that's a lot of where it. I think the real um, the real important aspect of it is having Krejci out there to be the guy who's creative and a great passer, great vision. And when you play those four forwards, I think that's where a lot of their power play success comes from anyway.
Mhm.
And a defenseman is there to move it, to shoot it, to get it on net. And I think Rizzo can do that. I think McAvoy can do that. So I
Mhm.
don't think they lose a ton there. I really think that they have enough forwards to have two pretty good power play unit lines, and I think the power play should be a strength of the team, even without Krug. The
Yep.
penalty kill, I was concerned about just for what you said, because Charo was, there to clear the net, for the long reach, to keep people out on the outside. And they really didn't miss much of a beat there. It really wasn't any glaring problems with the power with the penalty kill.
Mhm.
I think Carlo brings some physicality there, and I think for the most part, you're going to see Charlie McAvoy play a lot of minutes this year,
Yes.
and he's going to play some power play, he's going to play some penalty kill, he's going to play 28. He's going to be like PK Subban in the 28 to 30-minute role for the team, and that's fine. I think he can handle it. I think he has a body for it. So I think, overall, it was, again, the Devils are not the 79 Canadians.
Yeah.
So it's, there's a little bit of, I have to temper my enthusiasm a little bit. You'll really see it when they play the Islanders and the Flyers this week.
Mhm.
That'll be a real true test of those two units for sure.
Yeah, and on the penalty kill, I think you mentioned Carlo. I think he's gonna be he's gonna be that shutdown guy now. Carlo is gonna have to be that defensive-minded shutdown player that maybe can't necessarily replace Chara because Chara is, I mean, such a giant. You can't just replace him, but he's going to play a big role on keeping that puck out of the net on 5 and on the PK. And McAvoy going to play in all situations. And Kevin Miller coming back. He's more of a defensive minded, physical defenseman. I think he's going to help out the penalty kill as well and try and soften the blow of losing Chara a little bit.
Yeah, and I thought also, Joachim Nordstrom was a good penalty killer.
Mm-hmm.
Par Lindholm is a good penalty killer. So, but they have some forwards who can block shots and are willing to do so, and again keep everybody to the outside. And of course, your best penalty killer is your goaltender. And I think
Yep.
Tuukka Rask showed that he's still an elite goaltender. He's still a top 10 goaltender in the league. And if his head is in it, and if he's in a good space, then that's a real strength of the team. And it was last night. He pretty much helped them win the game. So
Yes.
I think that Rask was a question mark coming in, and I think we can all be comforted by the fact that it looks like he's engaged and ready to go. And I was really impressed with him because typically in the beginning of the year he shows some hiccups, and it
Mm-hmm.
takes him a little bit of time to get going. And he hasn't played even further than the other guys because he left the bubble. So it's been a while for him, and he looked like he was in midseason form. So that's a great sign for the team.
Yeah, speaking of the goaltending, I was honestly impressed with Tuca very much last night, and Mackenzie Blackwood for New Jersey as well had a phenomenal game. And kind of just overall looking at goaltending heading into this year, I was kind of expecting a slow start from the goalies just because of no preseason. And goaltending, I think, is the position that gets affected most by that because without seeing real game action, it's hard for the goaltenders to really get dialed in and locked into that midseason form, and not having those preseason games to kind of, at least play in 3 or 4 of them and get into that game action, I thought was going to affect the goaltenders more than anyone else. And around the league, we have seen some high scoring games, and that's a little bit more of what I expected to start the year. But as far as the Bruins last night, both goaltenders looked absolutely outstanding.
They did. Blackwood was great, and that's a good sign for the Devils because if
Mm-hmm.
your goaltending is that good, then you can stay in some games, and maybe they can in a short season they can surprise some people. They still need some front end talent and some scoring talent. But I thought that Blackwood was great, and I thought that Rask was great, and I think the Bruins goaltending should be a strength. They have two veteran goalies who've been there and are capable of being excellent goaltenders. So they have a luxury there for at least one more season. Next season, I have no idea what's going to happen, and I don't
Mhm.
think they do either. And
Yep.
that's the scary part. But I
Yep.
think that this year, in a short season, your goaltender steals you 3 or 4 or 5 games. That could mean that's a big difference between winning a division or making the playoffs and that type of thing, especially with a young D. And they're going to be relied upon when games just go south for the defense, and they're going to need to make some big stops. And Tuca did it last night when the Bruins weren't going well in the third period there, and he made some stops in the shootout to allow for time for Marchand to score the goal to win it. So I think the goaltending should be a plus for them.
Mhm.
I just didn't think, like you said, it would be as good as it was in the first game.
Yeah. So final thing here for about last night's game, I want to get to. Did anyone kind of surprise you with how well they played? Was there any like impressive performances in your mind? I think there's a few guys that we have to choose from, but just if you could just pick one, a real impressive performance from last night.
Well, I thought again that line of I thought Trent Frederick was really
Mhm.
good. I mean,
Mhm.
grinded, but that's what he brings, and he brought what he should bring. And I think if he does that, he'll be fine. And there'll be a real interesting situation happening when Pasternak and Smith come back, because
Mhm.
then you have to decide. Andre Kasha still drives me crazy. I mean,
Yeah.
and people are. It's funny. People have given him sort of a pass and said, "Well, he hasn't played a full season. Well, give him time. Well, he had one good year
Mhm.
with Anaheim,
Yep.
and he really hasn't shown since then an ability to score the puck.
Mhm.
So yeah, he's a possession guy that can handle it they can have it in the zone for 40 seconds, but nothing really happens. And Nick Ritchie was the same way last night. He should have had a hat trick. He had two
Mhm.
opportunities. If he just lifted the puck, he would have scored two more goals. So that's the type of touch around the net. But I thought Frederick and Wagner and Corrali were just what I envisioned them to be. He's
Yep.
really hard to play against as a fourth line group. So I was really impressed with them. I was a little disappointed in how they handled Studnicka last night. He
Mhm.
didn't play a ton. He only played like 11 minutes, I think.
Yeah.
And I know he probably had some issues there. I thought he was noticeable in the very beginning of the game and a couple of shifts, made a couple good passes, good decisions, has shows some good hockey IQ. But Bruce has shown in the past that he will pull a rookie. He gives him less leash than a
Mm.
veteran when it comes to
Yes.
those things. I thought that Nick Ritchie was okay. I mean, he scored and he had some other opportunities around the net, but there were other times where he just didn't fight real hard for the puck.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things problems I have with him is just going into the corner softly, not really fighting for it, giving up on it. And when he gets it, he doesn't seem to have much of a plan with the puck ever.
Mhm.
So those are the things problems I have with him. I'd like to see Bjork up in the third line when Smith is back with
Mhm.
Coyle. I'd like to see that third line for a handful of games, and I'd like to see Nick Ritchie get the healthy scratch. On defense, I liked Zaboral, as I said.
Mhm.
I thought he showed some ability. It's a really important guy for them because if he can be a top six a top four D guy,
Mhm.
uh, not only does it help a team, but also helps Don Sweeney's 2015 draft,
Yes.
which is still under
Absolutely.
is still under scrutiny.
Yes.
So if you can have Zaboral and even Carlo, who was a second rounder that year, if you can have Zaboral and DeBrusque and Carlo, it's a better feeling about
Yeah.
that draft with Zaboral. So I would say Zaboral and Frederick were the two guys who stood out with me as being pleasant surprises.
Yeah, for me it was Kevin Miller.
Yeah.
Just I was in the same boat as a lot of Bruins fans when they re-signed him that first day of free agency. I was like, what are they doing? He hadn't played in almost 2 years, and major knee injuries that at the time felt like they were probably going to be career-ending for Kevin Miller. And then when he made the opening night lineup, I was like, I mean, if you bring him back, isn't he at least your seventh defenseman? Like, I
Right.
wasn't expecting him to play, but all the reports from camp were that he had a very good training camp and that he earned that lineup spot for opening night. And then he went out last night and he looked like the Kevin Miller of old.
Mm.
And I was not expecting that. I thought he was going to struggle. I didn't know why he was going to be in the lineup. I wasn't expecting a good game from Kevin Miller, and he went out there and he played very, very well. He's a good defensive guy. He's not going to score a lot of goals. He's not going to bring you a lot of points, but he's going to play a good defensive game. And he was physical, which is especially coming off major injuries. That's something that a lot of time guys are a little touchy about getting physical right away. He was physical. He threw his body around. He had some hits, and I was just really impressed with Kevin Miller. And he's definitely a guy that stood out for me. I thought Frederick in that whole fourth line had a pretty solid game. Corrali on the Miles Wood goal was not great, but
No.
those are things that happen, and you can't scrutinize every single play because everyone
Right.
makes mistakes throughout the game. But I thought the fourth line overall was good, and I was happy with their performance. And um, like you said about Richie, Richie wasn't physical enough for me in last
Right.
night's game. And with him being a big body that he is, and the Bruins aren't exactly the big bad Bruins of the
No.
1970s anymore. Richie needs to be the physical one of those physical guys up front, and I'm happy he scored. It was a nice net front goal on the power play. I thought offensively, he had some chances and he was involved in the game at least, which we didn't see at all really last season with him. But he just wasn't physical enough for me in that game. I wanted to see him in the corners, banging bodies, mucking it up a little bit after the whistle. And Trent Frederick was the guy doing that for Boston,
Sure.
and it wasn't Nick Ritchie. So, um, I'd like to see some more physicality out of him, but thought the fourth line was good. Kevin Miller to me was a big time standout, just coming back from those kinds of injuries. And yeah, just overall it was a solid game, but those two things really stood out to me.
Yeah, I think Miller is a great story. I think that he's
Hmm.
exactly what they need. And obviously he creates great value at his price tag playing on the third pair. He's a great third pair guy if he
Yep.
plays that way and stays healthy. That's a
Yeah,
big
that's
caveat.
the big thing.
But Nick Ritchie, I think now we can make a solid conclusion that he just doesn't want to do it. He just doesn't want to be the physical player that they envisioned him to be when they picked him up. They wanted
Yep.
to get a little heavier, and he just doesn't play a heavy game for them. And I'm not sure what type of game he plays for them,
Yeah,
to be
it's
honest. I
tough
mean,
to
he just
tell.
doesn't do it. He just doesn't. He doesn't have much offensive. Not only that, I don't know if he doesn't have a lot of offensive skill or if his confidence just isn't there. When he gets the puck, it just looks like he doesn't know what to do with it.
Hmm.
And then, like you said, if he gets to the front of the net, fine. He may score 6 or 8 goals just being out there in front, which is fine. And he had a goal last year in the bubble where he was like face first in front of the goalie and it went in. Like that type of goal, it's fine. Greasy goals are great for him, but he doesn't want to bring that physicality. And there's going to be a numbers game here where he's going to be the odd guy out because
Yeah.
they can't afford to have him on a bottom six playing that way. It needs to be a more physical, especially if he's playing with Coyle and Smith, who are going to be possession guys and guys who win battles and keep the puck. And if Richie's just losing the puck or not fighting for it, it's just not a good matchup for
Hmm.
for that group. And he certainly is not going to play in the fourth line if he's not that way. So he's going to be an odd man out. And I'm at the close to the end with him, and yeah, people will say, "Well, he scored a goal and he had 2 or 3 chances after that." Well, he did, but first of all, he should have scored at least one of those other chances
Yep.
if he had any ability. And and the other stuff outweighs it with just not winning and fighting for pucks and being heavy. And I think that's going to be his downfall.
Yeah, and Richie was a top 10 pick. He was picked 10th overall
Yeah.
his draft year by Anaheim, and he was supposed to be one of those next power forwards that we were kind of molded after Milan Lucic and David Backes and Wayne Simmons and those kinds of power forward players, and he just hasn't lived up to it at all in his career. I think Anaheim knew what they were doing when they moved on from him, and they saw an opportunity to get him out of there, and they
Right.
took it.
They did.
And, I think for him to be successful at this point in the NHL, he needs to realize that he's not going to be a top line player. and that's just not who he is. And he's going to have to either adapt to that new, more physical kind of role, or he's going to find himself out of the lineup. And I think the day of reckoning with Nick Ritchie is coming here fairly soon, especially if Frederick continues to play well. They're going to put Frederick on that fourth line and keep him in, and Ritchie is,
Sure.
I agree, going to be the odd man out.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think there's a logjam there at forward, especially the bottom six forwards. And of course, another X factor is Jack Studnicka. And if
Yep.
he continues to show some inconsistency, or if the team isn't really comfortable with him being up in the top two lines, then that's another factor. I mean, do you see Bjork up there? Do you have to move Smith up there, which weakens your bottom six? So
Mm-hmm.
then it starts to get a little distorted. So you don't really want that. You really need Studnicka to continue to progress and be a top six forward. And if that happens, then guys like Ritchie and even Kasha are
Yep.
going to be really fighting for minutes if they're not producing and not playing not playing the way they want them to play.
Yeah, for sure. And along the lines with Studnicka, we didn't really see him much in the third period. Bruce kind of
No.
threw him on the bench, and we saw Coyle come up and play on that right side on that top line.
Yeah.
That's been a pretty common thing with Bruce Cassidy, is that, especially in a close game where he's not going to lose the game to play the rookie.
No.
If he thinks that moving the lines around and giving a veteran guy more ice time is going to win them the game, then he's going to do that. And we saw that last night. And I think it's, for a guy like Studnicka, it's a growth thing with him. He's still very young. It's really his first, he hasn't got a lot of NHL time. We've seen him in spurts here and there, but he hasn't played a full NHL season yet. And, he's a really young guy with, certainly some things to work out in his game, particularly on the defensive side. He's got all the skill in the world there. I think he certainly in the future he's going to be absolutely a top six player for Boston. But it's still a learning experience for a guy like him, and we in those tight games in the third period, I think we're going to see that veteran guy get the ice time over a guy like Studnicka, particularly if Studnicka is struggling or having some turnovers and things like that. So just my thoughts on that is that if you're Studnicka, you've just got to keep continuing to grow your game and keep trying to become the best two-way player that you can be. And it's going to be a growing process with him, and it's
Right.
something that we as fans are going to have to be patient with and understand that he's not going to be a superstar right out of the gate.
Well, right, and I think that there are a couple of things going for Studnicka. One, he's going to be playing with elite
Mhm.
world-class players,
Yep.
so that's one good thing. And then the other thing is he's a natural center playing on the wing
Yes.
in the NHL against really good talent, the best in the world. So it's he showed some flashes in the bubble where he showed some ability. I think he has good hockey sense. I think he has really good skill. I think he can pass the puck. So I think that it'll come with him. It's his first real game on a top, the top line in NHL and on a Stanley Cup contending team or close to it. So there's a lot of those factors that lead me to believe I need to be, that we as fans need to be a little bit patient with him. And I think
Mhm.
Cassidy is probably the right guy to handle it because he'll take him out when he feels that he's on the edge
Yep.
of disaster. But hockey coaches, especially in the NHL, have been like that. I mean, Pat Burns did that with Joe Thornton, and I mean, guys, the rookies sort of get pulled here and there to send a message and to show that we don't play that way, and the veterans get a little more leeway. Marchand turns the puck over a ton, but he doesn't get benched because he's a top player. So there's a fine line there, and Studnicka is going to have to sort of learn, what he can and can't do, and I think he'll figure it out. I think he's talented, and again, they have a lot of forward depth that he can afford to go down, say, to the third line, and figure it out for a couple of games, or take a healthy scratch and think about it for a couple of games. So I think there's enough talent there and enough depth at the forward position so that they can be patient with him and that they can sort of manage him properly.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, with the season started, the final roster is set. The taxi squad is set at least for now. Although we certainly could see some potential movement there as the season goes along. But just a kind of a broad question: were there any surprises in your mind with the Bruins' final roster, or did everything kind of shake out pretty much how you expected it?
Yeah, I was. It was pretty much how I expected it. I think I thought that it just must be the end of the line, but I thought that Zach Senyshyn would get a little bit more of a look. I thought they would maybe try to incorporate him in some way to see what they have in him, but it may be sort of the end of the line with that bad first round pick
Yeah,
in 2015. It's just, I mean, he's 5 years in, and he wasn't even picked up by any other team in the NHL on
yeah,
waivers. So that tells you everything you need to know about him. But other than that, I really didn't see any. There's a still this little thing hanging over them with John Moore
yep,
and having to play 40 games to be available for the expansion draft. And there's only 55 games left in a
yeah,
short season. So, he won't be able to be exposed in the expansion draft, and they're going to have to make some really tough decisions about that next season. Um, but I get, overall on the roster, I didn't really see anything that was too glaring. They have a pretty good, um, there's a pretty good separation between their NHL guys and their AHL guys right now. There's
mm-hmm,
not a lot of tweeners, and that's
yep,
because they're a really good team. And when
yep,
you're a team like, say, the Devils, there were probably a logjam of guys in there you have to figure out.
yep,
But with the Bruins, they have, especially in the forwards, they have, they know what they have, and
mm-hmm.
I didn't think there was anything really glaring there. Um, and now with Kevin Miller in there, you know, I like Connor Clifton, but his time may be sparing, especially in the beginning, because unless Miller gets hurt, he may be watching quite a bit. So
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think if Miller keeps playing the way that he did opening night, he's definitely going to stay in that lineup. And they kind of do have a bit of a logjam on defense, but it's also great to have that kind of depth as well, where when you add in Moore and Clifton, you really have 8 NHL defensemen there, which is certainly going to help you as the season goes along when injuries start to creep in. And I think some of those guys are certainly going to see time at some points during this year. Um, but I agree. There were no real surprises in my opinion. I think this roster shaped out pretty much how I expected it to. Obviously, when Pastrnak comes back, they're going to have a decision to make with Studnicka. Do they want him playing maybe on the third line? Do they want him, going back to Providence for another year? Because if he's not going to get the playing time up in Boston, is it really worth it to healthy scratch him and not have him playing as opposed to having him at least playing hockey night in and night out during the AHL season? So there's definitely going to be some decisions as guys get healthier, but for the most part, I think it pretty much shaped out how I expected. And as far as Zach Senyshyn goes, I've never been a big Senyshyn guy. Ever since seeing his first year in Providence, I was like, it's funny. Him and DeBrusque came in at the same draft, and they played in Providence right at the same time. And DeBrusque right away, I'm like, that kid's going to the NHL. I saw him playing in Providence. I said, DeBrusque, it's not going to be long, and he's going to be up in the NHL. And Senyshyn just never reached that level. And I remember last year, even down in the AHL, he only had like 6 or 7 goals on the
yeah,
season.
yeah,
And if you're a first round pick only scoring single digit goals in the AHL, I
yeah.
don't think your
4 years
chances of
later, yeah,
yeah, I don't
right,
think your
right,
chances of making the NHL are very high. And I think the
right.
writing's on the wall with him that this is probably it for Zach Senyshyn.
Yeah, I would think so. I think he's going to be either he's going to be a 4A player, or he's going to who knows, go overseas or
Yeah,
something. But he's not going to be in this organization very much longer, and it's too bad. I mean, that's the one pick when you gave up when you passed on Matt Barzal three
yeah,
times,
yeah,
and Zach Senyshyn was one of the guys. I mean, if Zaboral and DeBrusque, if you get something out of them, and
yeah,
DeBrusque was a good pick. I mean, he takes some of the beating because of the poor decisions, but he was the one good pick, and I'd make that pick again. I mean,
mm-hmm,
he's been productive. I know he has some inconsistency, but he's at a good value right now, and they'll revisit it in a couple of years, and hopefully he continues on, and then Zaboral is a big factor. If those two work out, then it won't be as bad. But the Seneschal, when you pass on Kyle Connor and Thomas Chabot and then Sebastian Aho and Brock Besser, and there were guys in that draft. That draft was loaded,
Yes,
and
it
you come
was.
Zach Seneschal is just it to me it's really unacceptable. I don't know what you're doing when I'm watching the draft, and it wasn't like guys had question marks and then they came about. When I'm watching the draft, I remember this vividly.
Yep.
Matt Barzal has to go here. Matt Barzal has to go here,
Mhm.
and they kept saying it for three straight picks,
Yep.
and they didn't pick him. And I thought at the time, like, what are they doing? And they take a guy off the board in Seneschal. And I said, well, geez, this is a real reach. Even DeBrusque was a little bit
He
off the
was a
board.
reach of that
He
pick
was a
too, but
reach at
he's
that
actually
time.
worked out pretty well.
Yeah, and Zaboro wasn't really the reach. He was kind of in the part where they thought he might be. If DeBrusque was a little bit of a reach, and Seneschal was an absolute reach.
Yes.
And
Yes.
to leave those other guys on, especially Barzal, and at the time everybody thought that he should go there without a doubt, and it was a steal there because some of them had him in the top 10,
Yep.
and he didn't go. It's just even more egregious. It's just
Yeah.
even more what are you doing? And that's they're drafting this past year. I think this past year was different because I really think they didn't want to add anybody to the roster or close to the roster. I think they
Mhm.
wanted projects for money situation
Mhm.
because of the financial constraints of the bubble and the situation we're in right now. So I think they wanted to go a little bit more on the project side. And from all accounts, Lowry looks pretty good. Like
Yep.
he might be actually a pretty good pick for them. And Kuntar looks pretty good at BC. And there's
Yep.
some guys in there who might have a future, but it's down the road.
Yep.
But that 2015 draft, I mean, you just went to the Cup Finals in 13 and almost won the thing. And that's a real chance with three first round picks to really create the next nucleus.
Yep.
And you kind of missed it.
Yeah.
And the Seneschal thing it will haunt Don Sweeney for a long time, especially if Matt Barzal ends up a Hall of Famer. So
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, hindsight's 2020, and there's bad picks every first round that when you look back on, you go, how the heck did that guy
sure,
go there? But it's definitely one that's gonna hurt the Bruins. With three straight picks, all 13, 14, 15 in the top half of that first round, and for you to there were some franchise-changing players like Matt
sure,
Barzal that went there. Thomas Chabot looks like a fantastic offensive defenseman. Kyle Connor's been a 30-goal guy for Winnipeg. There were some great players that went there, and unfortunately, it reminds me of when they drafted Zach Hamill at eighth
yeah,
overall, and the next pick was Logan Couture. And you
yeah,
think about how Logan Couture's career has gone with San Jose, and then
right,
you think about Zach Hamill, who never even became an NHL player on a regular
right,
basis. So,
right,
unfortunately, the Bruins have missed with some picks, and
yeah,
that's something that certainly could come back to bite them down the road. But still, they've managed to continue to be a winning team, and
sure,
I think the Carlo pick might really end up saving that 2015 draft for
right,
Boston because Carlo looks like he's becoming a guy that should have probably went in the first round, and the fact that they
sure.
got him in the second was a solid pick.
No, it was, and Carlo does save that, and I want to say it was Lozon in that draft too. I can't remember. There was another guy in there too, but I think that, um, yeah, if Zaboral and Carlo and DeBrusque, it's still a pretty good draft per
Hmm.
se. Um, but there's some questions on whether or not they use central scouting much.
Yeah.
There's now questions on why they're not taking Canadian players from the
Hmm.
Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. Like there's there's sort of I don't know it. Don Sweeney has this, and I don't know if this is it, and it may not be, but he almost has the smartest guy in the room aura about him. Like I'm going to be the smartest guy in the room, and I'm going to take this guy. And people in this past draft with Lowry were like, this guy was 140th or something. Like this guy was way down the list, and
Yep.
and nobody else had him here. But Don Sweeney knows more than everybody else in the entire league. Like so,
Yeah.
and I think there's some of that. And I don't know if they're trying to get a guy who I don't know if they're trying to, draft a guy who they might think they can sign rather than a guy who might give them a hard time signing or might carry a bigger price tag. Because now, if you look at it, they'd have to pay big money for Barzal.
Oh
They'd
yeah.
have to pay big money for Kyle Connor. Like if they
Yep.
hit on all those three, there would have been a real problem here because
Big time
they'd
cap
have
issues
three
for
guy
sure.
cap right. So do they think of that when they have three first round picks in the middle of the first round? Like do they think, well, if we stagger this and get a guy who's a little bit more of a project, get a guy who can play right away, and then another guy who's maybe a little bit longer a project and space it out,
Mm-hmm.
maybe that's part of the decision making too, which is viable if that's what they're doing because it does create a big problem when you have three first round picks at the same time,
Yes.
and if they all blossom, then you're paying big money to all three of them at the
Yes.
wrong time. So that's something that's not talked about a lot. But if you look at Matt Barzal right now, just signing that deal, he makes 10 million in his third year. Like holy smokes! Like that would have been a big problem. Now it's a good problem to have, and
Yes.
it's not a reason not to pick a guy, but it could be part of the process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if Matt Barzal was drafted by the Bruins, I don't think David Krejci would still be a Boston
Oh right,
Bruin. I think he would have been the guy that would have been moved out, and Barzal would have come in as that second line center.
right, right. And I think that's true. And I think maybe even Tuukka Rask wouldn't be here either. I mean, they
Mm-hmm.
would have had to find other ways to clear some money, um, and be able to fit in Barzal. Maybe DeBrusque wouldn't be here. Maybe they would
Yeah.
have moved on from him because they would have had a little bit more depth and they would have had the better player in Barzal. That could be too. And maybe if Shabbat's there, then maybe Carlo has moved on from. Who knows? I mean, there's a whole domino effect that happens when that happens.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that would have been if they hit on all those picks and it was an incredible 2015 draft. They would have had some cap concerns right now for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So looking ahead to just kind of this Bruins season as a whole a little bit here, just wondering, there any player that kind of sticks out to you that needs to have a big season this year to kind of prove their worth and their spot in the lineup?
Well, I think that Andre Kasha, for me, I think there should be more pressure on him than there is. And I think
Mm-hmm.
part of it is that they have a lot of depth at forward, and he doesn't have to really provide a ton of, especially with Craig Smith there and the focus on him and Studnicka, people looking at his potential. I think if there was a little bit less depth at forward, Kasha would have more pressure on him. But I
Mm-hmm.
think Kasha needs to show the value in the first 20 or so games here,
Mm-hmm.
or we have to decide what's going to happen with Kasha when it comes to the Bruins. Of course, Richie is another guy, but it's not as big of a loss, if he doesn't really make the team or if he gets waived or released or whatever, traded. It doesn't really matter. But Kasha's the guy who came in as a second line winger with Krejci and needs to produce for them to have a good season. And I think that Brandon Carlo needs to play at a real high level
Mm-hmm.
and stay healthy. And if he does, then that helps the defense. And of course, Rask is always a big factor. I mean, Rask, if
Yep.
his head is in it, and if he's healthy, and if he wants to play, and he's motivated, if he wants another contract, then he's going to have to play at a high level. So that's good leverage for the team if he wants to play after this year. So there's the three guys in my mind who really need to play sort of under the radar. Obviously, McAvoy and Bergeron and
Yeah.
Pasternak, those guys have to play well. But the second tier guys,
Yep.
I really look at Carlo and I look at Kasha and I look at, and of course, Rask, the goaltender, is really important. If they all play well, it helps the team. And I think that they'll have a really good season here. If Kasha doesn't pan out, then you're constantly looking for a second line guy, and then Smith may have to play there, weakens your third line.
Yep.
So there's that ripple effect, and so I think I look at those two guys, and Kasha and Carlo, as really needing to play really well for the team this year.
Yeah, absolutely. My guy that came to mind with me, and you did mention him, was Nick Ritchie. Now I agree with you that it's not as big of a deal if Ritchie doesn't perform. Like they can replace him. He's a guy that you can just pull out of the lineup and is pretty easily replaced. But from a career standpoint for Nick Ritchie, he's got to show something this season because I think like we talked about earlier, his time's running out, and if he doesn't put up some numbers and secure a spot in this lineup, this it could be, it certainly would be the end of Ritchie with the Bruins, and I think it could be the end of Nick Ritchie in the NHL if he doesn't do something this season. So I think this is a big year for him where you know, he's got to go to the net. That's how he's going to score goals. He's not an overly skilled player who's going to be sniping shots top shelf like David Pastrnak. If he's going to score goals, he's got to go to the net. He's got to plant himself in front of the goalie, and he's got to pick up rebounds. And if he can score that way, I think he can become a kind of an asset if he does play that role. But it's a huge year, and again, I wasn't overly impressed with his first game, even though he did score. I think he's a guy that's got to pick it up and got to get going, or his time in the NHL is running out.
Yeah, I think so. There were times when he could have gone shoulder to shoulder with a guy and just didn't make the effort, and just
Mm-hmm.
little things that you see in a game where just doesn't have that extra grind to his game to try to win a puck or to try to make a little extra effort and really. But but this is what we've seen with Richie. Like
Yeah.
at some point, you have to say to yourself, is this what it is? This is what it is. And sometimes you wish for it to happen, or you thought it might happen when you traded for him, but it's not the guy that they were looking for. They're not the type of guy they were looking for.
Yeah.
And I think when Smith and Pasternak are back, I'd rather have Bjork in there. I thought Bjork played pretty well.
Bjork had a decent game,
Yeah,
yes.
I thought he got in front of that a few times. I thought that he'll. I think he's a really good complement. It could be to Smith and Coyle.
Mm-hmm.
He's a guy who can sort of just lurk around and make some plays, and they'll grind it out and grab the puck and hold it, and then he's there to make some plays on that line. But Richie just didn't. I'd rather have Bjork in there.
Yep.
He's your own guy. He's your homegrown talent. He's younger. He's got a little bit more upside.
Yeah.
Why are we still going with Nick Ritchie? He just wasn't what they thought. He was trying to be the heavier player that they needed, and it just is in his DNA. It looks like. So I think that at some point you just have to cut bait, and they have the luxury to do so.
Yeah.
But I agree. For him personally, he needs to show in these next few games here that he's willing to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And if he does, and if he continues to produce, then maybe he can hang on there. But he is blocking Anders Bjork at the end of the day, unless Studnicka doesn't pan out as well, and then they have to use Bjork maybe on the top two lines. But he is blocking Bjork if he continues to play. So so he needs to bring it. He really does. And I'm not sure he can do it.
Yeah. Thinking of Nick Ritchie here, what I think a lot of Bruins fans and certainly what I wanted him to be was everything that Barclay Goodrow has been for the Tampa Bay Lightning, and we got to see him in the playoffs last year, obviously against the Bruins and all the way through to the Cup Finals. And Goodrow is just that big body, not super skilled, but he goes to the net. He has a little bit of finishing ability, especially in close. He can give you some secondary scoring, but big physical player. He can drop the gloves when he needs to. He's never afraid to throw a big hit.
Right.
And I think that's what Nick Ritchie was supposed to be, but
Right.
the Tampa Bay got the guy with that, and the Bruins did not. And Ritchie just hasn't been that style of player.
No, he hasn't, and I think that's a good comparison. I think that's exactly the type of player that they want and need. But I thought you saw that with the fourth line that after a while they wanted no, the Devils wanted no part of the fourth line. Like
Mm-hmm.
they were just winning pucks on their own because the Devils were just sort of giving in some, and that's what happens over the course of a game. That's the whole wearing down a team part. Is that if you're going into the corners and smashing people and really grinding out pucks over and over again, the defense doesn't want any part of it. Like
Yep.
they'll let you have it, and then they'll react from there. And I think that the fourth line was really starting to show that through the course of the game that that's what can happen when you keep
Yep.
doing that. It would help Richie immensely if he played that way. But again, you can't really coach personality, and you
Yep.
can't coach what's in a guy's heart and DNA. And I think that that's kind of what you're seeing now with him is he's just not quite that guy. He might do it once or twice here or there, like he did last year in the bubble where he took that foolish penalty
Yep.
and all of a sudden act like he was a maniac, when that's not what they're looking for. That's going the other way.
Yeah.
Like they want something in the middle there,
Mm-hmm.
and something that Trent Frederick can give them. And if Frederick's going to give that to them, then and if Bjork's going to give what he gave last night, I'd rather go with those guys because those are your guys that you've developed, and I'd send Nick Ritchie packing.
Okay, yes. So switching gears a little bit, there's quite an interesting situation going on down with the Florida Panthers right now. And it's linked back to Boston because of trade speculation now. And there's nothing's imminent or anything like that, but the Bruins are a team that's been linked to a possible trade here, and it's the Keith Yandle situation down in Florida. So very weird what's going on here. Yandle's been an alternate captain with this team for a while. He's signed to a long-term deal. He has 3 years left at 6.35 million. He's an offensive defenseman who puts up big points every year, but certainly has defensive deficiencies in his game. And now Florida has decided that they're not going to play him. They don't want him. He has a full no movement clause in his contract, so they can't do anything with him other than healthy scratch him to keep him out of the lineup unless he waives that or no movement clause. Um, and because he's a Massachusetts guy, he's local to the area, and Boston, there's been a lot of rumors around Boston's defense this year. They're one of the teams that are being linked to the Panthers as a possible trade destination for Keith Yandle. So again, there's nothing imminent. There's no real anything saying that this is actually going to happen, but the speculation is there right now for Yandle to the Bruins. Is that something that you would even want the Bruins to explore and look at, or are you just out on Keith Yandle?
I was in on Keith Yandle maybe 4 years ago. I mean, it
Mm-hmm.
seems that his name pops up every couple of years because
Yep.
of his, obviously, because he's from Milton. He's from just outside, just from down the street from the Garden, and he's been, local guy who's been a good player for a long time, and he's 34. He's a left shot D, which is the hot topic. It's been something that Bruins fans have been clamoring for. You know, right now their cap issue
Mm-hmm.
currently is that they just don't have a ton of space. And what would you give up for Yandle?
Yeah.
That's the other thing. I mean, and I don't know if Yandle is the type of guy. I would rather take a flyer on like a Noah Hannafin,
Mm-hmm.
who's 23, who played at BC, who's a left shot guy, but he's 23 and has a really good cap number until like 24, 25 season. Like he's at
Mm-hmm.
like less than 5 million. He makes less than the Endel.
Yep.
So I'd go with a guy 11 years younger and maybe take a flyer on that. Then I just think that Yandel is Logan Mullen from Nesson sent a tweet out, and I don't know if it was the Yandel situation or another player, and I tweeted back to him like, "This is player number 152 that the Bruins have been in on this
Yeah.
offseason and haven't done anything
Yep.
aside from Craig Smith, which is a great pickup,
Yep.
but." Again, every single guy who comes on, especially left shot D, immediately get linked to the Bruins.
Yep.
And a local guy like Yandel does. I just don't. I wouldn't right
Yep.
now. I just don't think it moves the needle enough. And I don't know how much is left in the tank with Yandel. I mean, it's
Yep.
a veteran guy, which you kind of need on the back end. But is he really worth taking minutes away from, say, Jakob Zboril?
Yeah.
Is he really worth that? I mean, I don't think so. I mean, I'd rather go with a better hockey trade, as they
Mm-hmm.
say, in a Hannafin type or someone like that who's younger and it can be more of a core guy going forward. Right now, you really don't have to do the rental thing right now at the beginning of the season. You really
Yeah.
don't. You're not in that spot, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know if I'll get there at all with the Endel. But again, 4 years ago, sure,
Mm-hmm.
I'd take a chance on him, and I think he'd be a good player for them. But now I just don't think they're in. I don't think they are that desperate right now to do something like that.
Yeah, personally, I'm a big no on Keith Yandle. The defensive game there is really really bad. He is awful in his own zone. He turns the puck over. He doesn't play good defensively. The guy's a point machine. He can
Right.
quarterback a power play, but the Bruins don't need that. They have Matt Grzelcyk. They have Charlie McAvoy. They've been running four forwards on the power play to begin with Krejci, and when Pasternak's healthy, he'll be out there. So they don't really need a quarterback for the power play. They've already got that. And Yandle's defensive game is just such a turnoff for me that I wouldn't even bother. And obviously with the cap situation as well, even if Florida retained half of Yandle's salary, he's still making over 3 million. That would count against your cap, and the Bruins don't have the cap space for that without getting rid of somebody off of their current roster. I just wouldn't even look at it if I'm Boston. I'm not bringing in a 34-year-old guy who makes Torrey Krug look like a defensive defenseman.
Right, right,
Um,
right.
to
True.
to come into this team. I'd rather see Zaboro get a look. I'd rather see Lausanne get minutes. And if you are gonna make a move, I'd rather go for a younger guy who has the potential to grow with the team and become a core piece moving forward, and not a 34-year-old. So personally, I'm out on Yandle. I don't really see the value there for the Bruins. And we'll see what happens with him in Florida. It's just a really interesting situation where a new GM comes in there with the Panthers, and all of a sudden, a guy who's been a top pair guy for you and is wearing an A on his chest, all of a sudden is not part of your plans, and you want to
Yeah,
healthy scratch him. Florida, man, things happen down there where you're
they
just
do.
kind of you get left scratching your head.
You do. And you know what? But a part of me says, you know what? Maybe that's the type of move you have to make. I mean, if the guy isn't
Hmm.
playing very well and he's terrible in his own end, and he's carrying a big cap number, and he's not providing what you need to provide, then maybe it's time to move. Maybe it's the type of savvy move you need to make
Yep.
to move on from a guy. The only problem is he's sitting there in the upstairs in his suit, like watching the game,
Yeah.
like making all that money. I mean,
Yep.
that's not a great situation either. And as an assistant captain, there can be some ramifications across the team of what, depending on what type of guy he is and how he's received by the team, could also be another factor. But Florida a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago, I thought they were really coming along. They had Huberdeau, and they had some really good players and
Yep.
young players, and I thought, they might be a team that's to be reckoned with, and it just never panned out for them. It
Yep.
just and Huberdeau's still a good player, and I'd take him, but they just don't seem to have. They just didn't seem to progress the way I thought they would, because I really
Yeah.
had them on the radar 3 or 4 years ago as a team that might be reckoned with, and they just never got there. So maybe it's time to blow the thing up. But I'm
Yeah.
with you. I don't think it moves the needle enough for the team. I don't think it's enough of an upgrade to really, stunt the growth of a young player or give up on a young player for Yandel right now.
Hmm. Yeah. One last thing just to touch on Florida, that what Carolina has done over the last few years, where they've kind of been on that upswing and getting better and better with their young talent every year. That's kind of what I thought Florida was going to do starting 3, 4 years ago, and that by now they would be
Right.
kind of that Carolina type team. But it's never panned out for the Panthers, and we've seen with the Hurricanes that they're a team that's going to be reckoned with for the next foreseeable future in the NHL.
Well, they are, and Aho is an excellent player, and he was
Yep.
in that draft with in the 2015, which was loaded. And they have done the right things, and I think that last year, the Bruins beat them, but I thought they were a player away
Yep.
from really upending the Bruins, and uh, it's a time right now for them if they can add a piece or two to really get up into that top 4 or 5 of the conference, and really battle for the conference in the next couple of years here. And they've committed to Aho, and he's an excellent player, and I would
Hmm.
I would take him for sure. He's an underrated player because of
Yes.
probably where he plays and so forth. But yeah, I like Carolina a lot. I like their team. I like how it's been devised, and I see them as a team that is really going to could really give the Bruins fits if they in the next couple of years. They won't have to play them this year, which I think they actually made out the Bruins not having to play Carolina. I think
Mm.
Columbus is a tough team for them because they're
Tampa
heavy.
Bay as well.
Tampa Bay is tough, and of course Toronto and Montreal are always tough.
Hmm.
So they missed out on a handful of teams there, and I think they
Yep.
were fortunate to do that. I think they match up better with, say, Pittsburgh. They
Yes.
don't match up great with Washington in the past, but Pittsburgh they do. I think they match up pretty good with the Islanders and
Yep.
the Flyers. It's those other teams that have given them more trouble, and
Yes.
they can to avoid them this year, which is good for them.
Yeah, so one last thing here just to wrap up the show. I want to take a look at the week ahead for the Bruins. On Saturday, they have the New Jersey Devils again, obviously with the schedule kind of playing the sets against teams for the most part this year. They get New Jersey again on Saturday. They get the New York Islanders for the first time on Monday. And then Thursday night, they play the Philadelphia Flyers. So just any of those games stand out to you as kind of like a game that's going to be a big time test for Boston?
I really am interested to see how, because I think Philly and Boston are the top two teams in the
Hmm.
division coming in. I
Yep.
think that they could be one or two. I think the Bruins are still going to win the division as long as everybody's healthy and they play the way they're capable and Rask plays well. I think they still win the division, but I think the Flyers are right there too, sort of 1 and 1A. So I'm looking forward to that matchup to see because the Flyers really came on last year,
Hmm.
um, and have really good talent. So I think those are the top two teams. I don't think Pittsburgh. I think Pittsburgh is a shell of their former self,
Yep.
and they
I
showed it
agree.
against Philadelphia the other night. Like people are still saying Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh, but I think Pittsburgh's windows closed like 3 years ago.
Yep.
I think it's Crosby, and it's not a lot else there,
Hmm.
and that's gone by the wayside. I think Washington's window is closing fast, and I think that people were concerned about Chara going there and so forth, but I don't. I think that Washington maybe has a year or two left before they really have to make some hard decisions, and so I think they're on sort of the backside of their run. So I think the Islanders and Flyers are right there, and I like the Islanders look good last night. The Rangers are kind of a mess, but
Yeah.
I like the Islanders. But I really my one concern is the Flyers, so I'm really
Hmm.
looking forward to that matchup and seeing how that plays out. The Bruins have had a history of doing pretty well against Philadelphia and seemed to be a pretty good matchup. David Krejci loves playing against Philadelphia. They should
Yep.
sign him next year because he loves playing there.
Yeah.
But I think it'll be interesting to see how they do against the Islanders and Flyers. It's definite difference in talent level than the Devils for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've got a great week of hockey ahead of us, and those are going to be fun matchups to watch. And I think we have a great season of hockey ahead of us. It's going to be a fun year for the Bruins, especially with every game within the division. Every game means so much this year. It's going to be a really fun season to watch, and I'm excited to see how it goes the rest of the way for the Bees. But that's going to do it here for episode 3 of Black and Gold Weekly. Matt, I thank you again for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate you coming on.
Sure, thanks, John. I really appreciate being on it. I think it's a great show, and it's a great addition to Black and Gold Productions. And you want to check us out at blackandgoldhockey.com for sure.
Absolutely.
We have tons of great Bruins content, information, speculation, anything Bruins. That should be your source to go to, and a team of great writers and a great podcast network. And this is a great addition to it. So I really appreciate you having me on, John.
Yeah, awesome. And I definitely love to have you on again in the future as well as I keep
Question.
bringing new guests on here throughout the season as the show continues. But uh, this show, as well as Matt, is the host of the Black and Gold Hockey Podcast, the flagship podcast of Black and Gold Productions. This show is also in partnership with Black and Gold Productions, and you'll certainly want to check us out, blackandgoldhockey.com. We've got great writers putting out articles each and every day covering the Boston Bruins, as well as a fantastic podcast network of many different podcasts bringing you all great Bruins content. So you'll certainly want to check that out. Again, it's blackandgoldhockey.com. And Matt's Twitter, if you want to follow him on Twitter, will be linked down in the description.
Awesome.
Great follow there, a lot of great Bruins stuff. And we're going to be covering the team all season long for you guys. So thank you guys so much for watching the show. Hope you enjoyed it. And we'll talk to you again next week as we come back for episode 4. But Boston's got a big week ahead of them here as we get into the season and really get things rolling. Thanks for watching, guys, and talk to you soon.